Welcome everybody back to Taco Tuesday. Today is sadly one of our last summer sessions, but we hope to continue to do this in the fall. Today on Taco Tuesday, we are going to talk about the top 5 inequalities that's fueling workplace discrimination and inequality against women. So, did you know that women make up about 47% of the workforce, but only 4.8% of top companies have women CEOs? Men are promoted at 30% higher rate than women during their early career stages. White women are paid 80 cents on the dollar to their male colleagues, and it's even worse for women of color. And 50% of women in STEM fields eventually leave their jobs because of hostile work environments. So these are some of the things we are going to discuss and cover today and dive a little deeper too. But before we get into that, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Stephanie, and she's going to do a little housekeeping for us.
Welcome to Taco Tuesday. Thank you everyone for being on the call. So as always, we like to go over attendance and the policies for confidentiality. So please make sure if you're on the call today to private message Ms. Fennell so that she can write down her name. As always, please stay muted if you are not talking. And if you have questions, comments, you can type them in the chat box. And also remember that we are all mandated reporters. So what that means is if you say something and it's harmful to yourself or to others, we do by law have to report that. So just keep that in mind. We want you to be able to share and ask questions, but we just want you to be aware of, as mandated reporters, what we have to do. So that is it, and we're gonna get started. So, as Jay said, men are promoted at 30% higher rates than women during early career stages. And I am going to talk to you about unequal pay in the workforce. So basically, according to the United Nations, gender equality will be achieved when access to rights, responsibilities, or opportunities are unaffected by gender. So, unequal pay. What is unequal pay? It is when a person who identifies as female and a person who identifies as male are not paid the same amount. So that could be hourly, that can be salary. It doesn't matter, but they're performing the exact same job or they're employed in the same position with the same job title, and they're making a different amount of money. So like I said earlier, or like Jay said earlier, white women specifically are paid about 80 cents on the dollar of their male colleagues, which means women are getting paid 20 cents less on the dollar than male colleagues. So when we talk about unequal pay is a form of gender discrimination. So gender discrimination is a situation in which someone is treated less well because of their sex. Usually, the example that we're given, usually when a woman is treated less well than a man. So an example that I wrote down, I just said, so let's say that I work for Girls Inc. of Tarrant County and my title is program director. And I work 40 hours a week and I make a yearly, this is all an example, this is not real. But I make a yearly salary of $33,000. And my male counterpart also has the exact same title of program director at Girls Inc. and works 40 hours a week and makes a yearly salary of $36,000. So this would be an example of unequal pay. We're doing the same exact job, we have the same exact title, but my male counterpart is making $3,000 more than I am. So that was just an example that I wanted to talk about as it relates to unequal pay. And then statistics, so as of 2018, a woman on average earned 81.6 cents for every dollar a man earned, and a woman's median annual earnings were $9,766 less than a man. And then, okay, so hold on, I'm gonna skip something real quick. So I'm gonna talk about pay gap, but I wanted to tell y'all, so pay gap is the difference between the average pay of two different groups of people. So that could be between men and women, or those who identify as man and woman. So in 2018, also, the pay gap was larger for women of color, and then, sorry, y'all, was larger for women of color, and they basically, for every dollar a non-Hispanic white male earned, women of color were making 61 cents less than that white male. And then also women within the 25 to 34-year-old age range, which is about what the Talk About It teens age range is, they earned 89% of men's salaries and wages, although it is it's still less than equal. So it's not as big of a pay gap in that age range, but it is still unequal. And then it said also that women must work at least 3 months longer on average to equal what men earned in a year. So you get your yearly salary and you make $33,000 and a man makes 36, it would take you 3 months to equal that $36,000 salary. So what does unequal pay look like? Highest pay gap, lowest pay gap. So as I said, pay gap is the difference between the average pay of two different groups of people. So in 2018, the highest pay gap was in Louisiana, and that pay gap was 31%, which was the largest wage gap in the nation. And then the smallest pay gap in 2018 was in California, and that was 12%. And this was looking at a full-time position year-round. Women were making 88 cents on the dollar. So women were making $49,000, and male counterparts were making $55,000. And that was, like I said, in the year 2018. So we're going to take it back a little bit. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act came to fruition, and what the Equal Pay Act said was basically it's a federal requirement that pay scales for identical work be the same regardless of whether the employee doing the labor identifies as male or identifies as female. So if a woman works the same hours, performs the same tasks, and is required to meet the same goals as her male counterpart, she is entitled by law, the Equal Pay Act, to receive equal pay of the male counterpart. So my last part is a question for y'all, but does anybody have any questions for me before I go on? All right. So basically our question is, how can women in the workforce overcome this pay gap, this inequality? So know your rights as a woman in the workplace. So it's really, really important to know about the Equal Pay Act and know what that means. And then also advocate. This one kind of, as I was typing it kind of upset me because we know men generally, not always, don't always have to advocate. They're oftentimes handed a promotion, or they're in the good old boys club, so they're automatically going to get that promotion, whether they've done the work or not. But as women, because there are inequalities, we have to advocate. We have to know our worth, and we must speak up for what is ours and what should be ours. So my next one is know your worth. We're going to talk about that later and kind of dissect like what that means and how you can know your worth. And then educate yourself on the pay gap and the Equal Pay Act, and then also gain knowledge on why unequal pay happens in the first place so that you can continue to advocate and speak up for what is right. I think education is so important. Even doing this today, this podcast, all five of us, we had to do some research. We had to educate ourselves, right? And so it's important that when you're going into talk to your boss or talk to your supervisor and you're really wanting, you know, a promotion or you're wanting a raise, like you have to educate yourself. You have to, you know where you're coming from. And also, like I said, you have to know your worth. So it's really, really important that you do that research and that education piece before trying to get the raise. So, all right.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, so our next topic is going to be about sexual harassment in the workplace. First of all, let's define what sexual harassment is. And this is the EEOC definition of sexual harassment. It is unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature when submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or wow, I'm struggling with my words. Implicitly, a term or condition of an individual's employment. All right, so first, let's say sexual harassment can happen between male and female, male and male, female and female. So it's not just males against females, even though that is the biggest cases that we do see. But it can happen to anyone in the workplace, but in majority happens to women. Statistics, there's 21% of Americans have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, and 81% of sexual harassment victims are women. 64% of healthcare workers experience verbal abuse. Approximately 22% of healthcare professionals report being assaulted. And the sexual harassment in the workplace statistics note that 28% of victims do not report the harassment to human resources or management, usually out of fear that nothing will be done or that they will receive consequences or snitching or telling on someone, especially if they're a boss or someone in power. 58% of female workers have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. 82.5% of women have reported sexual harassment in the academic medical centers. And the reason why it's going a lot on healthcare is because that's one of the top career fields that sexual harassment does happen. So you will see a lot of these statistics, a lot of health workers. 68% of women experience harassment in public spaces, including streets and parks. So it doesn't always have to happen in the workplace. It can happen outside the workplace, maybe work events that you go to, get-togethers. It can happen there. And there was a 13.6% increase in sexual harassment complaints between 2017 and 2018. So that's a little, couple years behind, but I'm sure that it has gone up. What is considered sexual harassment in the workplace? Sexual harassment is basically what we said, anything in advances that were unwanted from someone and it continues to happen. What kind of women are more likely to experience sexual harassment in the workplace? That question really, I wanted to touch on that because even though there is a dress code usually in a work professional place, that does not make you more of a victim than anyone else. Your size, your race, your physical appearance does not make you more of a victim, or that should not. Or your sexual preference should not make you a victim. So I wanted to touch on that before I got into some of the careers. So this is the research done in 2005 through 2015. So again, it's a little bit older, but the top careers is food services, accommodation and food services. So, and then the second one is retail trade. Manufacturing is third. It comes in at, I should probably do this. Sorry. Healthcare and social assistance comes in at 11.48%. Administrative and support waste management and remediation and public administration. Those are the top 7 careers that sexual harassment is very high in cases. And the one that comes in last is mining, which we all know that's the majority of a male career field. So in those places, if you can think about it, maybe some of you guys have worked there. I know I worked in a couple retail places, and It has come from customers and people that I have worked with. So I've experienced that myself, sexual harassment in the workplace. How should you handle sexual harassment in the workplace? Personally, it goes off of really how your supervisor has asked you. But I've kind of gone back to what Stephanie said, know your rights. Know your rights in that company. You have the right to speak out if you feel uncomfortable. So first I would say, if you feel safe enough to tell the person that is committing these uncomfortable acts towards you, and tell them that you do not feel comfortable, and if that handles it and they back off, I would say that. But if you do not feel safe, go to your supervisor and report it. Make sure it's down on paper. Make sure that you put it out and speak up. Yes, speak up for yourself, because like I said earlier, a lot of people do not report it because they're afraid of not being believed or getting consequences as they did speak up.
Can I add something?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times it's important, like depending on your agency or your company, they have policies in place for this reason, sadly, because it does happen more often than we think. And so, like we said, know your rights, but also like back to that education piece, like maybe even before you talk to, they put it in the chat box, but talk to HR, look at the policies of the agency, and then if you feel comfortable enough, go to the person that is doing these sexual harassment acts toward you. And then if you're not comfortable, that's when you want to go to a supervisor. And then if the supervisor doesn't handle it, you go above your supervisor's head. I mean, you just keep going until someone listens to you. And if they don't listen the first time, keep going back. Always speak up, as Ms. Cannell said, because eventually, hopefully, someone will listen and take you seriously. And
Yes. So thank you, Stephanie. Yes, always speak up. And also another thing that I want to add on sexual harassment, if you feel uncomfortable, you do not need anyone else to tell you that is sexual. If you feel it, it is what you felt. If you felt like it was sexual harassment, you do not need anyone to back up your opinion. You felt uncomfortable, so you should report it. And then also with there's the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that you can also report to if you feel like in your company that they're not handling it correctly.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I just want to say it's always important to speak up. I have worked, with a lot of young ladies that say they're scared to speak up or they're afraid they're going to lose your job. Your job is not worth your safety. So even though you may be afraid, or even though, you may have a lot of emotions going on, just always speak up and stand up for yourself. Because, you have to know your self-worth and know, like Ms. Worley said, if you're feeling uncomfortable, then it's probably for a reason. So just always speak up. Your job is not more important than your safety. So just always make sure you're following the chains of commands. And like they said, just if no one's listening, keep going to someone until someone will listen. And even if that, talk to your parents, talk to someone around you who can also help you if that company or wherever you work isn't listening to your claims.
Jonna, I have a question for you. I know you mentioned you experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. Which step did you take when it was happening to you, and did something come of it? Was there like an input of it into it, or like what happened with that situation?
In my situation, I think I spoke about it as far as like if you feel comfortable with that person, that you can go to them. And that was in my situation. We did feel comfortable. There was a lot of joking around. And I came to that person. I told them that some of the comments that they were saying made me feel very uncomfortable. And they understood at that time, but then it kept on going on because it was just something that I personally let go too long of joking and everything. And so I had to go to my supervisor, and we had to all have a sit-down meeting, and it had to be talked about as far as no joking. We do not allow that at all, even if it was in a joking conversation at first. So that's how it had to be dealt with, as far as like having the whole team sit down and be talked to. And that actually, there was no longer a problem after our supervisor addressed everyone.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. So I'm going to be speaking about two things, and that's racism and gender within that income gap or within the wage gap. So we already said being a woman classifies us as a minority, but also our race classifies us as a minority. So when two things that classify us as a minority come together and affect us, and it's not just because of our gender or our race, but both, that's when we call it intersectionality. So intersectionality is when more than one factor affects an outcome of something. So I looked deeply into this because as a Hispanic woman, I'm a double minority, and I'm probably experiencing that right now and will experience it in the future. But not only are women paid less than males, but minority women are paid significantly less than Caucasian women. And there are different attributes and different theories behind this. And so I say theories because there are a lot of quantitative measures like data, numbers that show us that maybe Hispanics and Black women maybe have different opportunities in schools and things like that. And those can be measured. However, there are some things that are qualitative that can't be measured that affect whether someone makes a decision on giving you a promotion or not, or even hiring you or not. And so some of those things can be as simple as your name. I actually had a friend who is an engineer, and she applied to a job with a male name on purpose because she knew that if she applied with a female name, that they were not even going to look at her resume. So those are two things that affect us, race and gender. So I looked at some more statistics, and it's crazy. I like hearing numbers, but sometimes numbers confuse me. But in the simplest way possible, in the simplest way said, over a lifetime, coming back to the numbers that we spoke about at the beginning, the earning gap between Black women and white men is $946,120. That's almost $1 million over a lifetime. And so the cents don't sound like a lot because they sound like cents. But if you add that up, $1 million, that can make a difference between your quality of living and whether you can take care of people. So many things. And so that even gives me chills. And so these are just facts. I am very passionate about the way race and gender affect the wage gap. And these are things that we need to constantly be aware of, but also bring up whenever we hear microaggressions. So microaggressions are basically aggressions that are almost passive. They're not blatantly said, but they are towards your gender or your race or your sexual preference. And it sounds like someone is being nice to you, but they're not. It's an aggression, and they're making decisions based on prejudice and being prejudiced and being biased. So some of those things are calling somebody by a different name. So let's say that somebody can't pronounce your name and they just start giving you a nickname you don't like. That's a microaggression. And underestimating, that is a big one. Underestimating can be a microaggression. So personally, I've heard, well, wow, where are you from? Like, where's your accent from? I didn't know you had a good job. I didn't know you went to college. I didn't know you were valedictorian. So things like that, that's underestimating someone. So underestimating someone's abilities because of their gender. Oh, maybe you can't stay late because you have a family. So now you're just underestimating my abilities based on my gender because I'm a woman and I have a family. So do you ask the same thing to your male coworkers and because you know they're a dad? So those are microaggressions that we might think, oh, that's so nice, they're letting me go home early, but would they do the same to a male? So these are things to look out for. There are other things that are called microaggressions when somebody comments on your behavior. So let's say that I used to work at a retail store. Somebody was like, oh, you're too nice. You're just too nice. You weren't aggressive enough, but it's okay. Whereas for a male, they probably wouldn't have given them that same excuse. Just because I'm a woman, they would say, you're too nice. Okay, maybe that's not for you. So I did some more research.
Yeah, touch on that. Actually, that's a big thing, especially as a Black woman in education. Anytime I go into a classroom, I've experienced that. Like if the teacher is of another race, it's like, can you get them together? Because they listen to your voice better. And it's like, because I'm Black, like, so those type of small things, you're like, oh wow, you think at that point that they say that, like, oh, you respect me because I can get the kids together. But really what they're saying in a very I guess way of saying, like, that Black woman's voice can get these. So I've noticed that in education going into classrooms. So experience.
No, I appreciate that. So we talked about like discrimination, even with like recruitment names and those microaggressions and underestimating, but also having access. So a lot of people know someone, and if you get that referral, that's when you get that promotion or that nicer job. And so sometimes even knowing somebody, and if someone's already at the top, then it leaves the people at the bottom, just because they have that one connection. And so-and-so's dad works at that company, they're going to put in a good word for you. And maybe your qualifications were much higher, you have much more experience, but even just networking and knowing someone could make that difference between that wage gap. So that's another thing that plays into even race and gender. So, oh, my son, hire my son, he's awesome, he just graduated college, and you're not that person's son. You don't even know his son, but you probably have more experience. But just because of that relationship, that's gonna it's gonna be cyclical. It's gonna continue, and it's just gonna happen over and over again. And then lastly, there are some expectations of minorities, whether it is women and race. So again, I'll just speak from a Hispanic point of view. There are expectations that a lot of Hispanic women know how to clean, right? And so, hey, can you clean this? Hey, what should I clean this with? Even asking a Hispanic woman, what should I clean this with? When there's other people in the room, like that's also a microaggression. And that's also discriminating. So there's so many little different things that are qualitative, and they're hard to measure because, I don't think we can keep count of how many microaggressions have been said to us, but those are things to just be aware of. One, whenever you are the leader in the room, to make sure that you treat everyone equally, because I'm sure a lot of you guys want to be bosses, are bosses, will be bosses. But another thing is how to respectfully call someone out when they are saying a microaggression to you and you don't appreciate it. So I would like to ask my colleagues, like maybe what are some things you guys have said or responded with when there has been a microaggression because of your gender or race or both? And how did that turn out? And I'll let y'all think for a second. Because I know it's kind of important.
I think for me, the name is one. My first name's not the easiest to pronounce, but like all throughout life. So like you said, Danny, they'll be like, oh, I'm gonna call you this. No, call me by my name. And I don't mind if, they get it wrong, but I have like gone out through work and they're like, I'm just gonna call you Kay. You can try a little bit better and say Kanai. But I think the name is just the biggest thing that I've like went throughout life and jobs. Girls Inc. does a great job, but like just certain aspects of that where they're like, my last name too. I don't feel like my last name is that hard, but it's Fennell and people will go Fennel. And I've had jobs where, coworkers will be like, oh, Fennel, ha ha ha. And I'm like, that's not my name. It's Fennell. So just little things like that for me.
I've had experiences in workplaces where I think the number one microaggression has been, I didn't act stereotypically Black. I acted white, or I talked white. And that took a long time. I think that was deeply ingrained in me as a child as a compliment. And it took until a job I had in my 20s to realize that this isn't a compliment to me, because I'm just me. I'm not acting a certain way, and there is no such thing as acting black, and when you tell people that they're acting black, it's putting them in this bubble of like, this is kind of the wrong way to act and this is the right way to act. So that's one that I really had to like shut down in my career, or just people talking to me, you know, at work and saying, oh, you speak so well, or, you know, you act like this, but you don't act like them, you know, type of thing. So
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to close with this thought before we move on, but this is obviously something that's ongoing. We're not here to offer one firm solution for what is happening between the wage gap, adding race and gender to that. So between the gender wage gap and the gender and race wage gap. However, some of the things that we can do on our part, I read that women who do get promotions are considered intimidating, maybe because they're a little bit more aggressive or more stern, but it is not fair. It's not fair that we have to work harder sometimes. We have to research more and maybe, you know, talk more about our worth. It's not fair, but it's definitely something that we have to do on our part, just to research to make sure that we are being treated fairly, and also being proactive to do the same when other people are in the room and treating people that way. And I'm going to pass it over to Kanai.
Hello, hello. All right, so I'm going to talk about why women are promoted less than men. So the why behind it, there's a bunch of different ones, but the biggest why was family responsibilities or obligations. Like mentioned before, you know, I think Danny said it, you know, oh, well, you can go home early because you have kids. So, you know, they may feel that as a woman, you know, you have a typical role to take care of the family. So that's one reason why they may not be promoted more than men. Women will kind of fall under more supportive roles instead of that because of those family obligations. Another reason is systematic. So unconscious bias, gender bias, different relationships, different access to certain opportunities, or before, I know someone mentioned kind of about who you know. Another one is that women self-promote less than men. Women feel like, you know, their actions and their job duties should speak for themselves, while on the other hand, men, you know, may brag a little bit more about themselves and what they're doing for the company or organization. Also, women get stuck in entry-level positions a lot more than men. And then women also may not be promoted more just because their companies may lack diversity and inclusiveness. So those are some different reasons why. So now I'm going to go over how often men are promoted more than women in the workplace. Now, some of these stats we already went over. Like we said, women almost make up 50% of the workforce, but entry-level women make 20% less. That goes back to what Ms. Stephanie was saying before. And then women are 2/3 less likely to be promoted after having kids. So let's say you're a single woman, or even if you're married and you don't have kids, you know, you might have a chance to, you know, move up the ladder. But once women have children, depending on the companies, for whatever reason, they're less likely to be promoted. Also, 29% of women believe gender is an obstacle in their advancement. So they feel like just because they're a woman in their career that they're not going to advance as quickly as a man. And then also companies are working on improving gender equality and hiring women in more executive roles. But where's my stats? Let me find. So women, 1 in 5 women have expressed being the only in their company. So they're the only woman in their company. So 1 in 5 women may be the only woman, and they may be the only woman in a higher position role. So next I'm going to go over what women can do to advocate and get promotions when men are just giving opportunities in the promotions. So like I said before, women don't self-promote as much. So that's something simple that I was reading. It sounds easier said than done, but it's okay to brag about yourself. If you feel like you're doing a better job, and especially a better job than a man, you know, if your male coworkers are bragging, you know, you can brag about yourself a little bit. And then another thing is that women have to provide more evidence to their competence compared to men for higher positions. And then also women are held at a higher standard compared to men. So even if a man and a woman have the same position, for whatever reason, the woman is held to a higher standard, is getting paid less, but is held to a higher standard compared to men. All right, so now I'm going to go over what specific positions men are getting promoted for more than women. And I was looking this up, and some of it is kind of like, we know what career fields women are in more than men, and we know women are getting paid less. But I wanted to go over like more like certain career fields. So of course, higher level positions, women are getting promoted less than men. Women often make up, like we said, half of the workforce, but a lot of women are kind of only in entry level positions. Higher paying roles are also something. So when I say higher paying roles, that's like STEM fields or certain careers. And I also read that a lot of women don't want to join STEM fields because they may be, you know, a minority. In the most part, there are not a lot of women who are in STEM fields, which is why I'm very happy to see a lot of women going towards that route. But I did read like they feel very uncomfortable. Maybe they wanted to be an engineer, but instead they chose something else, like a science teacher, just because they didn't feel confident. They didn't want to be, you know, around a bunch of men. They know that it's a male dominated career, but if you want to do a STEM field, go for it. Another thing is financial careers. So financials, banking, a lot of men are in higher positions than women. And then also marketing and sales positions, men are also mainly in that career field, not only, but then for those positions, they are at a higher level than women. And then my last topic is going to be just how can you ensure that you're going to get promoted in comparison to a man, or just how to get promoted in general. I know we mentioned before, but it's really important to have access to senior leadership. Build relationships is very important. You know, building relationships, knowing people, it's about who you know. And that's also something that I read that men do a lot more of in a way. And it's not saying that men network more, but maybe the connections that they build are a little different, that man-to-man connection, because women are hired at higher levels by other women, same as men, like vice versa. So if a woman is at a higher position, she may hire another woman to, you know, be the next level up compared to a man hiring a woman. Expand your network and build connections. Another great one was just to get feedback on job performances from your boss, to know what you're working on, what you need to do well, and what you can improve on. You know, that way, if you feel like this male is getting paid more than you, you know, go to your boss and say, hey, we have the same credentials. We're doing the same thing. What am I doing to not earn, you know, the same pay as them? And also, like we said, don't be afraid to speak up. This was the biggest thing I read in a lot of articles, was that women, you know, they feel like their work should speak for themselves. So they may not be speaking up and bragging as much as men. So do not be afraid to speak up. And then, like I said, men tend to speak up about their career goals and advancements, while women feel they should work for yourself. So those are just some simple ways to, you know, try and get promoted. Now I'm gonna pass it off to Jay.
Thank you, Kanai. So number 5, let me type it in the chat box, continue my. Number 5 is fear of asking to be paid what you're worth. So earlier in our conversation, Stephanie talked about knowing what you're worth. So how do we begin to understand and know what we're worth? So your self-worth is your own appraisal of your value as a person. So not allowing other people to set and tell you what your value is, but you setting the standard of what you are valued, or, you know, as a person. So some ways to start to recognize your worth is to reduce the negative self-talk, and replacing that negative self-talk with validation that you are enough and that you are valuable. And to start defining your value, assigning value to your skills and expertise. So if you are specifically skilled at something, have a certain expertise at something, then define place value on that, so that when other people try to down talk those skills, downplay your expertise, you know that you're valuable in those things. Also, identifying your purpose. So your sense of self-worth will likely begin to flourish if you're struggling in that area, if you feel like you're actively working towards achieving your goals. So those are some a little insight and help about self-worth. And so with fear of asking for what you're worth, there's a few statistics. So back about 10 years ago, this woman, her name is Linda Babcock, just in case y'all want to know, she wrote a book that's called Women Don't Ask. So in this book, she created the narrative that the reason why women aren't getting what they're worth, they aren't getting the pay that they deserve, is because they're not asking for it. So with this book, as well as other resources, they stated that only 7% of women actually negotiate during their first jobs, as men ask for raises and they negotiate 4 times as often as women do, or more than women do. And then nearly 70% of women accept a salary that they're offered the first time without negotiating. So they go to this interview, they get hired, and they're told this is what your salary this is what your salary is going to be, and they accept their salary with the idea of, well, I'll just work for more, I'll just work for to get the pay that I think I deserve, without negotiating that first. So those were studies that happened in the last 10 years. So more recent research has actually shown that women ask for raises at the same rate as their peers, as their male colleagues, but they actually receive those raises at 25% less than males do. So then we wonder, well, what are some reasons that women might not ask for raises, or they might not negotiate their salaries? And one of those reasons is the perceptions. So women are perceived differently than men in the workforce, especially when they begin to brag about themselves. I know Kanai just talked about, bragging about yourself. And yes, we want you and we encourage you to be confident about bragging about your skills and your expertise. But we know also that in the workforce, women are perceived differently when they brag as opposed to when men brag. For women, negotiating pay is often viewed as being greedy or desperate, and this leads to hesitation, which comes for asking for what they're actually worth in a workplace. And women just aren't encouraged to perceive their value as something that they should negotiate for, without feeling penalized or judged for actually negotiating. Women are conditioned, like I mentioned just a minute ago, women have been conditioned to sacrifice our value, to just get in the door and then take something for now and then work for it later. Another reason why women don't ask, and this goes along with one of the intersections that Danny mentioned, is because they're queer. So queer women and women who identify as trans, they usually face steeper pay gaps than cisgendered women. So cisgendered women are women who identify as female, like they're born, as opposed to a gender non-conforming person or a trans person. So the National Center for Trans Equality, a survey reported that 47% of participants who identified as trans women or gender non-conforming had been denied a promotion, they've been refused a job, or experienced other negative professional consequences because of their identity. And when you experience these things simply because of your identity, it's hard to feel like your skills and assets and your expertise is valued, which would then prevent you from wanting to negotiate and ask for more. So, and this goes along with the culture in certain workplaces. So if you have like a more male dominated place of work, or a place where sexual harassment is happening or racism is happening and it's not being called into question, then women, for fear of not experiencing those things, also fear asking for more and asking for what they're worth. So then we have the question, okay, well, if all this is an issue, then how do we fix it? So the first thing that I'm going to say about fixing it is that these problems, for one, I don't think should be the responsibility of working women to fix a massive system of discrimination, although we understand that it's going to have to be the women that come in to try to fix a system that's kind of built against them. So one of the ways that we can fix it is, we talk about the pay gap often, is pay transparencies. So when companies make their salaries known, then we can avoid the pay gap and pay transparency. So if you don't know what your colleagues are earning and who are doing a similar work as you, and their similar background, then it's very difficult to know whether you're getting a fair salary or fair wages. And also on an interpersonal level, when individuals start to become more transparent with each other about that kind of information, then it's much harder for unjustified pay disparities and for pay discrimination. So I know that in most workplaces, we are discouraged in talking about what our salaries are, not hurting the next person's feelings in the case that we make more than they do, and not causing those problems in the work environment if there is a difference in pay when the next person has the same skill set and same everything as you. But on the contrary, it is important to have those conversations, because you'll never know if you're getting paid what you're valued, and also what the next man or whomever is paid if we don't start to have those conversations with each other about what our pay is. Another thing that we can do is push for female leaders, and not just for any female leaders in the workplace, but female leaders who are going to fight for other women to get those same pay equalities in the workplace. We need to have more women who are willing to help make workplace policies. And also, when you think about negotiating, a lot of the times when we say asking for more, we always think about asking for more in the form of money. But we need to also get in the habit of asking for new roles and responsibilities that will utilize and highlight our skills, so that we can get in the habit of asking those things. And then when our skills and our expertise are being used, then we'll be more comfortable with asking for the pay that we feel we deserve, and that highlights our value as people in the company and the organization that you work for. And one other thing that you can do is keep asking. So it is probably quite often that when women ask for more pay, that they might get rejected. Understand that rejection happens. It doesn't feel good, but try to remain positive in these times, and also improve your arguments, improve what you're going to say the next time you go and negotiate and ask for different role, more money, and things like that. Because when you keep improving your arguments, then it makes it harder to reject you. And when you keep asking, eventually you might get that position. So the last thing that I'm going to say about all of these gender inequality is that fighting gender inequality in the workplace is not a private or a solo activity. It's more of one that is for the power of all of our voices. And when that's multiplied and we raise them together, then we can push for better policies and pay gap transparencies. And we can fight so that all women can get equal pay, and not just the ones who seem to be bold enough and confident enough to ask for it, because all women deserve it, whether they ask for it or they don't. So are there any questions? Does anybody have any experiences that they would like to share on any inequalities that you have experienced in workplace? No? Okay, so for the next part of this, we have a very special guest. So we have the CEO of Girls Inc., and we would like to give her space to so we can hear a word from our CEO. Jennifer.
Jasmine, and thank you for everybody who's logged in today, who's taken the time to talk about this. This is something that is close to my heart. Not only pay equity, but also opportunity. So whether it's about expanding your understanding, expanding your training, expanding your opportunities, I think it's really important discussions to have. So I'm just going to give a little bit of my background. I'm going to roll it all the way back to the 1980s and talk about how I got where I am. So I grew up in a home where I had the most wonderful family. I feel like I need to preface it with that, but grew up in my home with a lot of gender inequities. So while my brothers were outside doing the lawn, they were doing man's work, I was expected, or even while they were out having fun, I was expected on summer days to be helping my mom. I was expected to help with dinner. I was expected to clear up dinner. My brothers wanted seconds. I was expected to get them seconds. Just grew up in a very gender traditional home. When it came to education, my parents always told me that I was going to be a great wife and mother. And while there's nothing wrong with being a great wife and mother, they never encouraged me to think about education beyond high school. While they didn't discourage me, it just wasn't something that was important to think about my career, because obviously that was going to come secondary to the role that I would play at home. I really rebelled against this. It didn't sit well with me growing up. It didn't sit well with me in my teenage years. I took on a lot of leadership roles in high school and college, and just really enjoyed being in that position. And so I did go to college. I studied business with an emphasis on economics, an untraditional field where I found myself in economics classes, being one of just a few women in there at that time. And I began working. I knew that I wanted to do something gender specific. I knew that I wanted to present girls with different options than what I had experienced. And so I began working at a residential treatment center. And so the residential treatment center was all girls, but it was girls who had experienced trauma. It was girls who were already in the system. And after working there for about 3 years, I loved my work, but I knew that I wanted to be part of the before story. I knew that I wanted to be part of telling girls early on what their options were, providing prevention programs. And so that is when I found Girls Inc. And I moved here to work for Girls Inc. And just loved the mission and have loved it ever since. And I think that our mission, while you see more women in leadership roles everywhere from small nonprofits to superintendents to running countries, we are still grossly underrepresented in our world. And so I think that the mission of Girls Inc. still has a lot of work to do. And so often we celebrate these one-off victories, and they're worth celebrating, but it should be the norm to see women in these leadership roles. So I wanted to talk a little bit, when I began at Girls Inc., I was a program director at Workman Junior High in Arlington. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my trajectory of my career and advocating for my career, and what I've seen in the nonprofit world as I've navigated it. So a lot of it really, a lot of what Jasmine and Kanai were, or Ms. Fennell and Ms. Boss were saying really resonated with me, because it really represented what I tried to do and I saw other counterparts doing as I moved through my career. So oftentimes when I would find myself kind of plateaued at a certain point in my career, I would go into my bosses and I would say, here are my skills that I can do. I can write grants. I can do this. I have this new partnership with this school where I think we can have this additional contract. And I would advocate for additional responsibilities and how it could not only benefit me, but how it could benefit the organization and the mission. And I would write up proposals. Some were accepted, some were, sent back to put more thought into, and some were straight out rejected. But I was always looking for ways that I could contribute not just to my own career, but to the organization, and advocating for that. One of the things that I really tried to look at as I was going through this process and growing in my career is what training opportunities could I take advantage of? Not just schooling, but what new skills could I learn? What could I learn about finance, even when I wasn't even connected to the finance department? What could I learn about grant writing, even when I wasn't connected to grant writing? And so always trying to expand the scope of what I knew and how that might play into my future career someday. And so what I would encourage you to do is every single training opportunity that's offered to you, to take advantage of it. Every time somebody invites you to the table to use your voice or even to listen to others, take opportunity of it. And so I think that that's so important for us as women, right? It's not just about, well, it is about, reaching back and lifting each other up, but it's also about giving others opportunity. Even when it doesn't, seem to have great significance, it's going to have significance to somebody else. So if you're going to a meeting, bring a colleague along with you. If you are going to a training, invite one of your sisters to go with you. Invite them into your circle, make introductions, build a network for others, just like you hope that people will be doing for you along your career path. So I will say that, when you think about education or not the nonprofit world, you probably look at those two pieces and you think, these are really female-dominated roles, right? You look at education and you see all these women. You look at the nonprofit world, you see all these women working there. But then when you look at those high-level leadership roles, oftentimes they're filled by men. When you look at members of nonprofits, board of directors, or school boards, they're oftentimes filled by men. And so I found this interesting statistic. 75% of the nonprofit workforces are women, while women only represent 17% of nonprofit leadership roles. So I think that a lot of things contribute to that, and you guys have covered a lot of it, so I won't repeat too much, but part of it is we need to ask for more opportunities. We need to be at the table more. We need to promote our own work. All of those things, yes, but we also need to make sure that our school boards and our board of directors are full of women who are considering women for these leadership roles. Because like often hires like, just is what it is. Like often partners with like. And so it's important to make sure that when you look at a nonprofit's board, that there is representation for all across those boards, and making sure that we have that diversity, because they're going to advocate for having more employees, more leadership, but also more services that they're offering to the communities that they care about. So yeah, I think that one of the things that I just wanted to share with this group is just making sure that not only we're advocating for ourselves, but also that we're reaching out to other women in our circles and bringing them to our networks, bringing them to the table, bringing them to the conversations. So much of the time it seems meaningless to bring, a peer to a meeting, but the people that they can meet there, the information that they can absorb, just the experience of being in a meeting will offer experience that will elevate their career moving forward. And so, yes, it's about advocating for ourselves, but also it is for lifting one another up. So are there any questions or just other things that you'd like to hear about? I feel like I've repeated a lot of the amazing things that your program leaders have already said.
And you can unmute your mic and just ask it, or remember, if you don't feel comfortable or for whatever reason, you can put it in the chat box, and then we will ask those questions for you. Questions, comments, or anything, actually, you can just unmute.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And this is for our awesome CEO, Lemus, as well as for any of you who want to answer. How have you actively built your confidence to feel worthy of what you're advocating for?
Oh, that's so hard, because we all have that voice. And I'll tell you, Rachel, when I got hired for this position, I was getting paid about 50% of what my colleagues were getting paid. And it was so embarrassing and hard for me. And it's ridiculous to look back on now, but to make a spreadsheet and take it to the board of directors and say, we are a women's empowerment organization. And I want you to look at what I'm looking at and see if it's reflective of our values. And, I think it was Jay that said, that self-talk is really so important. So, just being able to recognize and share with others and promote the things that you've done well, I think is really important. So oftentimes, have you read, I read about this all the time, when men see a position that they only meet 60% of the qualifications, a man will apply for that position and say, I can learn the other things, or I can figure it out. A woman will not apply for a position typically until she knows that she meets almost 100% of the qualifications. And so I think having that overwhelming confidence in ourselves of, I got this, I can do it, is something that's really hard to develop, but you can when you have the right network around you, right? It's not only the self-talk, it's the people who are also telling you how awesome you are. So build that community.
Thank you. I guess I have a question, and again, thank you for being here with us today. It's so awesome just to hear like the background, even going back to like your family and how like that you use that to push you. But we also know, and those of you who don't know, our CEO is a wonderful mom to 2 boys. And again, we went back to how a lot of people use that and say, oh, you're a mom, you might not be able to have this position, you have other commitments and responsibilities. So not only are you a boss at work, but I mean, you're the boss at home too. So how do you maybe even like cut that off, or do you combine both? So how do you maybe cut off your home life from work, or how do you combine it? And was it easy, or how did you go about doing that? And what are some things that you ensure to instill in your boys because of your experience?
Well, so one of my proudest moments was when Gabriel, my oldest, in 7th grade, I got an email from his teacher telling me that he had just educated his entire class about what Equal Pay Day was. And it's sometime in March, but it's the amount of time that women have to work to extra to equal what a man earns in a year. And just the fact that he knew that, he had listened, and he had shared it with his community was one of the most exciting times for me. I think it comes back again to building a network, right? So I have a network at home, even when they were small, of people who are supportive of the work that I do and not resentful of it. And so, yeah, there's nights. Tonight I'm going to be working. We got a big proposal due to the county by midnight tonight, and I'm going to be working. But my family, because they're passionate about the mission of Girls Inc. also, I chose a partner and I raised kids who care about it. They don't get resentful of it. Now, it can be overdone. If I went on vacation next week and had my laptop with me and wasn't participating in fun family activities, they'd probably be upset. But I find in my position, it's not possible to disconnect one from another. You'll see me answering a text from my kids during a staff meeting sometimes, and my kids will see me working on a proposal tonight after dinner. And so life is just kind of a little bit more interwoven, but I encourage you to find, to build a network of people, to have the people who are closest to you be people who care about what you care about.
I love that. Thank you.
And vice versa. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
You really are. This is one of the most important discussions I think that you all can have. And, just like, our girls who are on the call, they have their sisterhood of girls. This is your sisterhood also. And I just, I love seeing you all have these important discussions with one another and supporting each other as you advocate for yourselves and for each other and lift one another up.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And thank you for being with us today. You answered so many questions with even just your life story and the details you gave, and you make it seem effortless. I don't know how you do it still, but thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for being on the call and for being receptive to what we had to share. Next week, we're having a taco truck for everyone on Thursday to celebrate. So we will be giving you guys more details. If you have attended our taco sessions and went on the chat box and just make sure that we counted you for attendance. And Girls Inc., we like to do things for the free. So talk about free tacos. So we'll be putting out that flyer and sending y'all information about that. And we look forward to seeing y'all next week, next Thursday, not Tuesday. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.